Welcome to Majority Half Hour. A very special episode today because we are going to be chatting about the budget. And with us, we have Jamie Driscoll.
Hello.
We have Harry Cross.
Good evening.
And we have the lovely Marianne. And Marianne, it's your first time joining us on Majority Half Hour.
Yes, hello.
Oh, very big welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us. Okay, let's dive straight in because there's an awful lot to unpack here. And Jamie, I'm going to put you on the spot. What did you think of this brand new budget?
Overall, it's kind of a non-budget. It didn't really change anything. Now, some people might say that's great. I mean, yes, there was £26 billion extra tax raised, but we have nearly a 3 trillion economy. So the big numbers, but does it change who owns the water companies? Does it change the fact that there are still loads of people can't afford a home? Does it change the fact that that our public services are underfunding and large proportion of our infrastructure is crumbling? The budget didn't change any of that significantly. Now, it is the government's job to make things work, so it was a big letdown from that point of view. One of the things that's being presented as a good thing, and it is in absolute terms, is the removal of the two-child benefit cap. But that's a little bit like saying, oh, isn't she lovely? She stopped punching me in the face. Because I listened to that speech and Rachel Reeves was making out that child poverty was the most evil thing ever and she was the saviour. In which case, why did the Labour government suspend 7 MPs for backing an amendment to end the two-child benefit cap back in last July when they first came to power? Instead, they decided to strip the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. And what was particularly galling was here talking about the removal of the rape clause. And this, for those who don't know, this is in order to prove that you're claiming your third child is that it was the result of a rape and not conscious choice to have. You know, it's a really horrible, intrusive thing to do. And it costs almost nothing to reverse it. So why, as a great feminist, did she not do that immediately? That is unconscionable that you've let that carry on. And by the way, the two-child benefit cap is still in place until next April. If she really cares about this, why aren't people getting an early Christmas present? So, you know, that really speaks to it. And speaking of Christmas, I thought there was a lot of stocking fillers in. Some of these numbers sound big. £18 million for playgrounds. Sounds wonderful. You know, £18 million more than I've ever earned in my life or ever will. But I Googled it and we've got 30,000 schools in this country, state schools, which means that if you divide that money between the state schools, it's £609.51 per school. And if you care to Google it, which I did, a commercial grade swing set alone is £4,000 plus installation. So it's not actually going to make a difference. And that's really what the budget was. And I think right, you've got to ask the political reasons about this. Now, I know that there are those in the Labour Party who I call hand-wringing people. Oh, you know, we'd really like to do it, but we can't. And the reason they say they can't is because, the markets won't allow it. There's bond vigilantes, which has nothing to do with Daniel Craig or anyone else. You've got this strange pseudo-religious belief, or certainly pseudo-scientific belief, that there's all these people who hold government bonds who are sort of, oh, are you spending this money wisely? And that's not what they do. Bond traders have one purpose alone, which is to make money. So there's a lot of rubbish spoke about it and all these projections and things like that.
Can I interrupt you? So I had never heard before this budget the term bond markets. Why are you bringing them up? What is it about them that makes them, I don't know, that we need to discuss them?
Yeah.
What's the point of them? What is it about?
Well, a government, basically speaking, if it wants to spend money, it has lots of little ways, but the 3 big choices it's got, you know, it can raise money by charging us for our passports and things like that. That's never going to bring in a large amount of money. But it can tax people, and there's a whole range of taxes. If you buy a chocolate bar, you're paying tax. If you earn money, you pay tax on it. You get charged national insurance. They're all different versions of tax. It can create money if it wants to, and has. This country's created nearly £1 trillion. That's £1,000 billion since the financial crash. So you can. It's their currency. The Bank of England can issue notes if it wants to, or not real notes so much these days as electronic credits in bank accounts. And the third option it's got is it can borrow money. But unlike perhaps me or you, Steph, if we wanted a new car, we might go do the old-fashioned way and go to a bank and say, "Can I have a loan, please? I wish to purchase a car." And they would look at our credit score and say, "There you go." But governments don't do that. They do it by selling something called a bond. If I want 100 quid, I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions in reality, but I want 100 quid, then I would say, right, I'm the Bank of England, 100 quid bond. Steph, there you go. You give me 100 quid now and I'll pay you, say, 4% every year. So I'll pay you £4 a year for the 10 years of the bond. And then at the end, I give you your money back. And so that's how governments borrow. And if you try and push too many bonds on the market, there aren't enough people who want to buy them. Pension funds buy them, some investors buy them. But there's only a certain demand for that. And if you want to sell more, you have to pay a higher interest rate to attract new people to it. And so the cost of borrowing does go up. I think the thing to take away from this is if you listen to the budget speech, there was figures after figures. We predict growth's going to go up like this and go up like that. And last year it did this. And they're all wrong. Every single Office of Budget Responsibility prediction is wrong. I'm going to show you a graph. This is the graph this particular one happens to be productivity growth. Can you see the yellow lines?
Yes.
Yes.
So this yellow line over here, that was the prediction on what would happen to productivity. That's coming out of the crash. And then they do 2 a year. So over here somewhere, you'll see there's 2 starting there. They're the 2 different predictions it gave in the same year. The purple line is what actually happened. Can you see any correlation between the purple line and the yellow lines? They get it wrong. They always get it wrong. And everybody knows they get it wrong. So why are we doing this pseudo-religious, we must placate these projections, instead of just investing in housing, better transport, making sure that kids who are struggling at school have a decent mental health appointment so they can grow up and be better educated and more productive. If we just fixed the real world economy, the financial markets would follow and take care of it. We've got it all the wrong way around. But I'm going to show you one final one here. Now, this is from the actual Office of Budget Responsibility one that came out yesterday. You can see the yellow line, which is the March forecast. And this is for this particular one, happens to be business investment. I chose this one just because it's clearest. And the purple line is the November forecast. So these forecasts are both from this year. Now, along here, you'll see this year. What you might notice is the figures are different from past years. Can you see that?
Yeah.
They have, for the year 2000, right back here, 2 different figures from forecasts this year. So not only can they not predict the future accurately, they can't even predict the past accurately. And this is the basis of deciding that we're not going to invest in clean energy or dealing with homelessness. If we were at war, we would say this really matters. When there was a pandemic, we said this really matters. When we've got we've got a climate emergency going on, and we're saying, bond markets. But the reality is that bond traders, when you see all these sort of little febrile changes in the bond rate, that is the result of some bond traders trying to get one over on other bond traders by trying to beat the market predictions and things like that. It's the same with any speculation. You can call it gambling. I know it's quite as simple as having a flitter on the Grand National. There's skill behind it, certainly. But speculation is a form of gambling, certainly.
I think there's skill in gambling on the Grand National, some people in my family would say.
I'm not qualified to comment on that.
I just pick my favourite name and then run with that. Marianne, I know that you wanted to chat a little bit about
Reeves
budget with regards to the climate and climate change. And obviously we do have a climate emergency. And what did you feel came out of the budget that would look after our planet, if anything?
Well, I think if anything is probably the big question. So I think before the budget came out, I was expecting a little more ambition, given we are in a climate emergency. I think that's almost it's a given that we need to act now. It's already too late. So I was hoping for a little bit more ambition there, but no. I would say overall, it's very timid. on their proposals. I think they've given a little bit of a little nod to nuclear. I think is it the Wilfer power station, and I think it's Anglesey in Wales. But there's no kind of bold investment. There's no transformative plan, that's precisely what we need. No plan for expanding out the renewable sector and a kind of development of jobs in the clean economy. So I'd say that overall, it really sort of clings to the kind of, as Jamie mentioned, it's really that narrative around kind of fiscal caution, debt reduction, the old politics of austerity, and just very incremental tweaks. And now it's really not the time for incremental tweaks.
Oh, I've lost you, Marianne.
Yeah, we've lost you. Well, actually, while you're plugging back in,
sorry, sat on my mute button.
You're back.
Oh, you're back.
They can get around.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just going to say, I think very, very unambitious overall, and it fails to address the pressing need to act. So yeah,
so you're a professional in economic development, Marianne, and that was a large part of my role as Matt. I'm just thinking your thoughts on if we actually just invest in the real economy, finance will follow the opportunities. It always does. And everything I ever heard from everyone I was talking to was, we want more investable propositions. Can you people give us something to invest in? Because there's loads of money out there looking for a home. That's why it's going to bonds, is because there's nothing better usually. So you were talking about the small modular reactor, which is getting built in Anglesey, I think. These things are actually really quite expensive. What would be involved? What would be the benefits? How would it change the country? From everything from job creation to whatever else, if we actually set the target of mass deployment of renewable energy to bring down energy prices.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way forward. I think, as you say, a little modular nuclear reactor in Anglesey for a start, it's not going to generate many jobs. I think I'm not sure exactly where the nuclear reactors are going to be built, but I would be very surprised if they're going to be built here in the UK. So I'd guess there would be very few jobs there. I think if you had a sort of mass program of rolling out renewable energy, so that could be anything from wind. So I know we've already got an active wind energy sector, but I think we could go a lot further. I think there could be a lot more onshore wind in England, which is something that I think Ed Miliband was talking about early on, probably about a year ago, but I'm not really seeing much evidence of that progressing in England. And there's plenty of land. We've got a lot of wind in the UK as well. Scotland manage it. There could be expanded solar sector as well. Marine energy, I think that's another one. Tidal, where the UK has natural capabilities that we're just not really reaping the benefit of. But I think that it's really important to say that in parallel to kind of investment in the infrastructure and the technology, I think a really clear plan around training, around that pipeline. So I'm not talking about immediate job creation, but training people up so they've got the right skills, or like a really long-term plan for that. And I think as well, retraining programs for people who are currently employed in the more carbon intensive industry. So I know that there's a lot of talk in the north of Scotland. There's a lot of fear of renewables because oil and gas being so important to their economy. There's fear of mass layoffs. But I think there are a lot of sort of transferable skills for workers in the carbon intensive industry that could be retrained into renewables. Also, I think it would be a really good source of employment for future generations as well. There's a lot of talk now around how difficult it is for young people to enter the labour market with AI displacing a lot of entry-level jobs. So I think we need to really start thinking about a kind of alternative plan or a route into a kind of secure career for those young workers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then incentives for green technology innovation. I think that's another area that we're kind of quite lagging behind on.
In terms of ambition, which I was talking about, what we could have done is developed a 20-year plan and says, this is how we're going to get abundant free energy for everybody. You'd need energy storage in that for the times the wind doesn't blow, although it's really not that often in this country that there's no renewables. And that will massively bring down the cost of electricity, which is currently tied to international gas prices and all sorts of economic shocks cause of it. It will make it much easier for industry and commerce because their bills will plummet, as well as our cost of living, which then will mean our cost of living will fall as well, because restaurants will have to pay less for their energy bills, for example. And all of this then feeds into, where does the money come from to do that? Well, if as a country we're spending a damn sight less on gas and oil to do these things, then that's where the money comes from. And the finance is just a mechanism for getting us there. It's a bit like borrowing to invest and you end up making a profit, which is what every single company does that operates in the private sector. So there is a route through. And that's, I think, the biggest disappointment is this Labour government promising change is actually doing exactly the same as the last government, but wringing their hands about it a bit first.
What you said there was just so full of the hope that we could have, because looking ahead for our gorgeous planet, we want to preserve it for generations and generations. You're right. There was nothing said. That's actually unbelievably tragic for our children and children's children. And like Jamie, something you said earlier, finance follows the opportunity. If we can put those opportunities out there and educate and re-educate and retrain people, then if the finance would follow that, can you imagine if oh my goodness, if a government took a chance and actually invested, like you say, Jamie, 20 years down the line? Wow.
Yeah. You could raise the money somewhat from taxation, somewhat from standard borrowing. You could QE some of it, create the money. You could also create a specialist bond that is just, in the same way that loads of people bought gas shares when it got privatized in the 1980s. Give the public an opportunity to save a bit of money in this, and they're guaranteed a bond, and you're going to get it back because the government's behind it. There's options if they just had a bit of imagination.
Yeah, I think the other thing I was going to add there as well, community ownership of renewable energy. Jamie, I think you mentioned early on about privatize how water is privatized. I think you could quite feasibly have a kind of local ownership structure for renewable energy as well. But again, absolutely nothing in there. No kind of nod to that at all. I know that in Scotland they tried. I think there's a few small communities who've quite successfully they've got some turbines and they get some money back from the renewable energy generated from that, and then that's reinvested into the local community. But absolutely nothing. I've not seen any evidence of that in England, and it's certainly not seen any evidence of this government kind of having those kind of ideas either.
I've heard of a scheme about like that in Germany. A guy was telling us about it, and he was saying there was this village where they wanted to put some turbines, and the local community automatically get a share of the money coming from it. And there was this guy who was a climate skeptic and he didn't want it and all the rest of it. And he didn't raise an objection. The guy was saying to him, he says, well, I thought you said you didn't understand any of this sort of stuff and why it was happening. He says, I understand where a check is.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Harry, what did you make of the budget? Did you watch it as it was like coming out, or did you see it when it was early? It had a little early release.
Well, I didn't see the 40-minute early release. I wasn't quite as fast as that. But it was funny. We had a very big run up to it. Rachel Reeves floating ideas and then retracting them. And I guess that's clever politics, because I at least was expecting much worse. And so I think our expectations were all lowered to then be told, OK, it's not quite as bad as it could have been. I think there is a link to the financial markets as well, that everyone's now got this fear from Liz Truss when she was Prime Minister. ironically thinking she was giving the markets exactly what they wanted. That's another story for our bond market episode, I think. But yes, people don't want surprises in the day anymore. They want to sort of war game things and float things, both within the Labour Party's parliamentary membership to see what will float, to see in opinion polling what will float, and to see in the financial markets what will float. So it's interesting. On the one hand, there's a chance to sort of discuss a bit in the run up. On the other hand, we are too subservient to the markets, as Jamie said. The other thing that struck me a lot from this budget, as with the last budget from Rachel Reeves, is this is austerity. And austerity, when David Cameron was Prime Minister, was a very important political period for my political formation, as it was for many of the other people here on this podcast who I know. And I'm very struck by the fact that very little has changed. We're still cutting around the edges. There's not much left to cut now, so it's hard to find low-hanging cuts, and the cuts that do come in are very cruel. And perhaps it's a problem that in the opposition to these sorts of policies and on the left, we seem to have stopped using the word austerity in daily language. And perhaps it's our moment to show our arguments were right then and they're right now. That's not a criticism of the people here on this call, who I know do make these arguments, but perhaps out there in the political opposition more generally. And I asked myself, why is it the same thing when we had a change of government? And I think the reason is because their views of the economy are not that different. So I've had the fortune or misfortune to see a lot of Labour Party members up close, people from the sort of political wing governing the Labour Party now. I know Jamie has too. I know Marianne has as well. And the way they see themselves, if they say, well, we're the sensible ones, we're the adults in the room. Of course, we want to do all these nice things down the line, as Jamie said, the hand wringing. But first, we're the adults and we're going to look at harsh economic realities. And for them, that means doing what the financial markets tell them to do and what the right-wing economic think tanks tell them to do. They don't have their own analysis. They don't have their set of ideas. They don't have a bookcase as big as Jamie's behind them. And that's really true. I've been to some of their houses. And that's a problem because what has the Labour Party done? They've said we want loads of new homes. How to do it? Well, option one would be to build homes, and that's probably what we'd favour on this call. But what they've said is they've gone to the private property developers and said, what would it take for us to build more homes, for you to build more homes? And the developers say, to cut all the regulations holding us back. And they've cut the regulations. They're getting rid of our green belts. And lo and behold, the home building does not take off, certainly not the sort of affordable bottom of the housing ladder homes. And it's the same thing with the budget. They go to the bondholders. Remember, a bondholder is someone who's lent money to the government. And they say, what do you want us to do? And of course, if you've lent money to someone, you don't want that person to spend money on anything other than paying back your loan. So that's what the bondholders say. But what they forget is that a national economy works very differently to a household economy. So if I'm cutting down my expenditure to make sure that I pay my bank back, fair enough. But if the government does it, government spending is really important for so many people's incomes, for so much investment, the money people get through welfare, through public sector salaries, they go and they spend that straight away in the economy, creating jobs for other people. I once said in a chat with some friends, it's funny, no matter how much we reduce public spending, the economy never seems to expand because we're just contracting the economy and making it smaller and smaller and smaller. So whoever's in government, they're hoping to do the exact thing that will finally trigger a reaction and recovery by itself from the markets. As Jamie said, looking at every prediction and forecast saying, GDP growth is 1.5, not 1.4. This means we can spend a tiny bit more of money on this and that. And that's not how the economy works. It's about what are the main things we're investing in for the long run that other businesses can plan around because they know there's going to be investment there in the future. One final thing, something that the bondholders and the right-wing think tanks are saying we need to cut is our welfare bill, because that is one of the main sources of public expenditure. And we can see very cruel cuts in that regard. There's been a reduction in the sorts of vehicles for mobility aid that will be given to people with disabilities. And we're not going to save all this money by doing these cruel cuts around the edges. Now, on the one hand, I think those of us on the left should say we should defend welfare spending on compassionate grounds. But we should also say that we too want to see an end to this spending because we want to see an economy where people have good jobs. So, what I believe we should be arguing for is for a full employment economy and saying the state will lead that, turn the welfare bill into a salary bill for good jobs, maybe low paid at the beginning, but to facilitate people's re-entry to the job market. Bring training in-house into the job, and the idea that employers have so internalized that training is someone else's business and they can expect to hire the worker fully trained. No, on-the-job training happens on the job. And let's set a government standard as an employer of first and last resort, and that will have really positive knock-on effects in the economy beyond.
I feel like you've thought a lot about that, Harry.
It was my homework for this episode.
It's interesting you say about major projects that the industry can get around and base its own planning on. I had a conversation with the global chief exec of Hitachi, and I happened to be at this business dinner. He was sitting next to me, and I was angling to see what opportunities I could get for investment and jobs here. And I said, "Are you going to be investing in green hydrogen?" And this is where you use electricity to make hydrogen, which can power ships, boats, etc. And he says, no. He says, I'm not going to commit £500 million to research and development unless the government tells me there's going to be a market for this for at least 30 years to pay back my investment. And that's the lack of certainty. That's why, I mean, does anybody really know what this government's plans are? Well, I don't think even they do. So why would... if you're going to be, Marianne was talking about training. If you're going to be training people to be the skilled workforce to do this, you need some years of notice, and then they just change it. This happened in the bond market. That poll's got down. What's Nigel Farage says? We better change our policy on this. No wonder that whole bloody place is chaos.
Yeah,
Marianne.
Sorry. No, I was just going to just agree with Jamie there. I think one of the problems that we've had over the last sort of decade or more, there hasn't been that sort of that story, that vision. So I think the various governments have sort of their little flavors of the month. So I think Boris Johnson was all in for hydrogen, wasn't he, for a little while? It was like, oh, how are we going to be, building hydrogen production facilities, green hydrogen in, I think it was Teesside. Then that was shelved because Rishi Sunak came in, and then it was all about data centers. Data centers are the future, even though how many people are they going to employ? Like a couple of security guards. That's it. So you're not going to get your thousands of jobs. And then I think there's just no vision coming from Labour government either. There's nothing. So I think as you said, Jamie, about the kind of 20-year training plan for renewables, I think across the board we need that vision. So you can create a kind of longer term strategy of what we're all working towards and how the economy is going to build into that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, as Metro Mayor, I worked with many a Tory minister who not only did they have no clarity on how to deliver their objectives, in most cases, I don't even think they knew what their objectives were, except to get through the next month. And so in reality, they delivered very little because they outsourced both their thinking and the mechanism of delivery to well-heeled private sector organisations whose sole loyalty is to their own bank accounts.
I think that what I've taken from you guys all talking there is that what we're needing is some education around politics and budgets and economics and training and a vision for a budget that will actually better all of our lives and not just, like you say, just keep bond markets happy, which I now know what they are. So thank you very much. Well, thank you so much to Marianne, to Harry, to Jamie for being on our majority half-hour budget special. Yeah, and I think we're going to have to do another one because I think there's so much to unpack. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Steph.